When you think of the most expensive video games, you might think of Nintendo World Championships or Flintstones Surprise at Dinosaur Peak, all of which are NES games. But not all expensive games are exclusive to the NES. The Atari 2600 has games that are worth over $100, sometimes even $1,000. Let's take a look. What's going on? It's Podrez, coming at you with another video. Okay, we're going to be talking about some rare Atari games today. If that sounds like fun to you, hit that subscribe button right there. We have an amazing community in our Discord server. If you want to be a part of it, just go to discord.podrez.net. Alright, let's get started. When you consider the most expensive video games, the Atari 2600 might not come to mind. Atari games are normally very inexpensive, but there's some that go for a shockingly high amount of money. I thought it would be cool to go over a few examples. Let's get started. Number 1. In the early 80s, Purina aired a series of popular commercials involving a chuck wagon riding around a kitchen. As a promotion, Purina commissioned the company SpectraVision to develop a game based on the line of dog food. The result is a game called Chase the Chuck Wagon. You play as Chucky the dog, and you must reach the chuck wagon at the top of the level before the time runs out. The levels are maze-like, which means you might go the wrong way by mistake. The object that's bouncing around the screen will temporarily stun you, which is bad because you lose time. The dog catcher is even worse because you immediately lose a life if you run into them. My only issue with the game is the controls. Chucky does not fit well in tight spaces, and it's easy to get stuck. I feel like the developers could have been more lenient with the hit detection. Otherwise, it's your typical average 2600 game. Because it was only available through mail order, Chase the Chuck Wagon is slightly more scarce than other 2600 games, but it's often overblown how rare the game actually is. You can find the game as low as $125, which is expensive, but cheaper than other games on this list. Number 2. The company Imagic was created by former Atari employees. The developer Dennis Coble wanted to make a game based on Atlantis. His previous game was Trick Shot, which he said was difficult to program because of the physics. While he didn't enjoy working on that game, he did like working on Atlantis. It's a shooter where you must defend the city of Atlantis. Spaceships will travel horizontally across the screen. If you don't shoot them in time, they will destroy a section of the city. If every section gets destroyed, you automatically lose. You have 3 different locations you can shoot from. The left and right bases shoot at an awkward angle, but it can be useful for hard to reach places. The game is similar to Missile Command. In that game, you're also defending a city by shooting down enemies before they reach you. This is no coincidence, as Dennis admitted he was a fan of Missile Command. Atlantis would end up being Imagic's second most successful game, behind Demon Attack. The game is very cheap on sites like eBay. You can literally pick up a copy as low as $10. So why am I talking about it then? Shortly after the game's release, Imagic hosted a video game contest centering around Atlantis. Whoever got the highest scores would be sent a copy of Atlantis II, which is a harder version of the original game. Whoever got the highest score in this brand new game would have a chance to win $10,000 in the grand finals. Because Atlantis II was only given to contest winners, the game is extremely rare. Only a few copies have surfaced over the years, with the last one being in 2024. This one sold for $3,000. While the history behind it is interesting, the game itself is nothing special. It's literally just a ROM hack of the original game with no graphical changes whatsoever. The only difference is that the enemies are a bit faster and you don't get as many points for destroying them. The box art is exactly the same, but with a sticker in the center that says Atlantis II. Imagine paying $3,000 for a game that's worth $10, but there's a sticker on the front, so it's worth it. Number 3. In 1982, the Coca-Cola company commissioned Atari to develop a game for them. Instead of creating a whole new game, they made a ROM hack of Space Invaders. The original developer of the game, Rick Moore, left the company at that point, so they hired Christopher Omarzu for the job. The game was not meant to be commercially released, but instead only distributed to executives at Coca-Cola. Only 125 employees received this game, making it one of the rarest Atari titles. We can tell by this box and cartridge that it was only meant for a few people. Yeah, some box art this is. It's almost completely white. The game is basically Space Invaders, but with one big change. The main goal is to try to score as many points as possible within a time limit. You no longer have lives, but if you die, you waste time on the clock. The graphics have obviously been modified to be Coca-Cola themed. It's clear this is a ROM hack because the controls feel similar to the 2600 version of Space Invaders, and the sound effects are exactly the same. If you enjoyed the original game, this is a nice spin on it. It's not just a graphical hack. Unfortunately, many employees who were given this game threw it away, which only makes the game even more rare. Today, the game can sell for up to $2,000 on websites like eBay. I respect Coca-Cola for commissioning Atari. Just imagine if your employer hired a video game company to develop a game just for you and your coworkers. That's remarkable. Number 4. For those who don't know, Atari 2600 games can only hold up to 4 kilobytes of ROM space, but this would change in 1980. The game Asteroids would use a technique called bank switching, which essentially doubled the amount of ROM space. But even then, 8 kilobytes was a very strict limitation. There's really not much you can do with that. Some developers began experimenting with digitized voices in video games, like in Berserk.
Intruder alert, intruder alert.
But using a real human voice took up significantly more ROM space than a regular sound effect, so when Berserk was released on the 2600, the voices were removed. But there was one developer that wanted to make voices in 2600 games happen. Here's Quadrun. It's a shooter where you have to destroy the enemies that move vertically across the screen. As you make it further, the enemies will have different movement patterns that make them tougher to hit. When you make it to the Weta wave, which is the last level in the game, the enemies will be randomized, which means you have to remember their movement patterns based on appearance. When you fire off an energy ball, you have to catch it on the other side of the screen or else you lose a life. You also lose a life if you touch one of the enemies. If you lose all 3 lives, the game is over. Despite only being an 8 kilobyte game, the developer, Steve Weta, managed to fit his own voice in the game.
Quadrun.
In between stages, the voice will get higher pitched and faster. Including a real human voice in an NES game is difficult, but this is the 2600. This should not have been possible, but Steve Weta made it happen. Quadrun was originally intended to be released nationwide, but because it didn't perform well during playtesting, only 10,000 copies were made. Because of its limited release, the game sells for over $300 today. Number 5. With success in the toy industry, Parker Brothers decided to become a video game publisher. The company was able to secure the license to numerous arcade titles from Nintendo, Konami, and more. Unlike other companies, their arcade ports turned out well without too many sacrifices made. Their version of Frogger, for example, plays nearly identical to the arcade original despite the hardware limitations. This is remarkable when you consider that other arcade ports were heavily scaled down from their originals. In 1983, Parker Brothers released Qbert on the 2600. It's a puzzle-type game where you must color in all the blocks by jumping on them. You can only move diagonally, and one hit is an automatic death. The purple snake is the enemy you really have to worry about because he'll follow you throughout the stage. These spinning platforms will let you escape danger, but they're only temporary. Once you use them, they're gone. When looking at the arcade version, you wouldn't expect it to turn out all that great on the 2600, but Parker Brothers did the best they could. The only issue is the fact that the enemies move very robotically, almost like you're playing on a Tiger handheld console. I assume they did this to minimize flickering, but it makes it hard to tell where the enemies are going to move. Otherwise, considering this is only a 4 kilobyte cartridge, I'm impressed at how this turned out. You can find the game for less than $10 on eBay, but that's not at all the case with the sequel. Qbert's Cubes was originally an arcade game. The object of the game is to rotate each cube so that it looks exactly like the one on top left. Whichever way you jump off the cube is the direction it will rotate in. If you successfully match the color placement of the cube on the top left, it will turn green. When you make an entire row of cubes green, you win the round. In the later stages, you have to complete more than one row. The game can get very confusing because you may not know what direction to turn the cubes. When there's enemies on the screen, you might inadvertently turn a cube the wrong way simply because you're trying to get out of the way. The snakes, once again, are the toughest enemies because they follow you. The 2600 version was scaled down quite a bit. The levels are smaller because they couldn't fit as many cubes on the screen. The cubes also don't have a rotation animation, which makes it more confusing. If you've never played the arcade version, you might have no idea what's going on. The premise is exactly the same though. Unlike the previous game, the enemies have more fluent movement and the graphics are a bit better overall. Considering how unpopular and complex the arcade version was, I'm surprised they even bothered making a 2600 game. I do think it's a decent arcade port though, considering the hardware limitations. I do like the original Q*bert better, but this is a nice twist on the gameplay. Unfortunately, the 2600 version of Q*bert's cubes was only sold in limited quantities, and even then, it mainly was only distributed in Sears and Hills department stores. The cheapest one I was able to find was over $160. So these are just a few of the expensive 2600 games. Even though some of these are worth over $1,000, that's only a drop in the bucket compared to the most expensive NES games. Part of the reason this might be the case is because you don't see as many people collecting 2600 games as you do NES ones. The price can only be as high as what someone is willing to pay for it. I just don't see as many people caring about Pepsi Invaders as they would about Nintendo World Championships. If you made it this far in the video, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button right down there. And what are some of the rarest games you own? Have you played any of these rare Atari games? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.